Good afternoon. On behalf of the Historical Society of Harford County, welcome to What's Your Story? The Historical Significance of Looking Back. Before we begin, please be aware that this event is being recorded and will be made available publicly through the Historical Society webpage and on the Society's YouTube channel. The Historical Society of Harford County is the oldest county historical society in Maryland. The Historical Society collects, preserves, promotes, and interprets the rich and diverse history of the Harford County area in its regional context, from prehistoric origins to the present, for the education and enjoyment of current and future generations. The Society's headquarters at 143 North Main Street in Bel Air, Maryland, houses extensive collections of court records, artifacts, photos, books, newspapers, portraits, articles, and written materials by and about the people and places of Harford County. This presentation was initially planned as part of the Society's ongoing Brown Bag Lunch series offered at the headquarters building each month. In response to the COVID pandemic, we have moved all events onto a virtual format, and we appreciate your effort to join us today. Our presenter is Debbie Jennings, also known as D.A. Jennings. Her books include the award-winning Mia, Ripples in the Water, Cheese, Yes Please, Seize the Cheese, 100 Lies, and American Sports Legends, Your Turn to Score. Ms. Jennings teaches creative writing classes at Harford Community College. Her speaking engagements include writing groups, schools, churches, and community venues. She is also a member of the Harford Writers Group. She holds an undergraduate degree in broadcasting from the University of Texas at El Paso, a master's in public human resources administration from Central Michigan University, and she graduated from the Army Management Staff College. She holds a special affinity for the American soldier based on her 30-plus year of working as a civilian for the Department of the Army. The presentation will cover the historical significance of memoirs, selected readings from memoirs and autobiographies of current and past Harford County residents, and practical considerations for writing a memoir of your own. We hope that it will inspire you to write your own memories, which you can submit to the Historical Society as an addition to our permanent collection. More on that later. After the presentations, Ms. Jennings is going to answer your questions about how to approach writing your own memoir. If you'd like to submit a question, please type it in the chat section. You will find the chat icon on the bottom of your screen. You may have to hover it over a bit at the bottom of the Zoom screen with your cursor to see it. With that, let's begin.
Thank you, Jackie. First, let me thank the Harford Society for inviting me to come speak. I am so excited. For those of you who know me, you know that normally when I give a presentation, I'm standing and moving and jostling all about. So to sit in a chair is a little bit hard for me. But I want to thank them for being so accommodating to me. One thing I'm going to do right now is when I'm talking to you, I'm going to be looking all over my screen because I'm going to envision each one of you out there. And I'm talking to you on the left and on the right and in the middle and up and down. I just want you to enjoy this time together and just think about what you have to offer other people in the way of your life experiences. Let us start off with a question. Is it true that a picture is worth 1,000 words? Well, if that is true, then the question then becomes, what 1,000 words best describe that snippet of time? You see, without the written word, details of the experience fade as moments turn into days, months, and then years. Smiling faces can hide many tales. But today, I want to help you start your journey, or provide information to help you continue your writing adventure that will tell future generations your unique story. There are 5 writing considerations that we are going to cover in more depth later. First, what life experience or experiences do you want to pass on? Another, what do you hope to achieve by telling your story? What potential impact will your version of the events have on other people? What are some potential resources that you can use to tell your story? And also, is it necessary to enlist the help of others to stay committed to the task? But before we go any further, let's cover the definition of two words, autobiography and memoir. Technically speaking, depending on the dictionary that you use, an autobiography is an author's narrative about his or her entire life. A memoir is reserved more for a theme about that person's life or experiences. And there lies the blurring of the distinction. Let me explain. Memoirs generally deal with themes such as overcoming personal obstacles, coming of age stories, public figures sharing their personal lives and thoughts, dealing with catastrophic events. The possibilities for subjects are numerous and extensive, but often the details laying the foundation for the subject at hand and the resolution or lessons learned as a result cover decades. So because of the number of years covered, you will find some books listed as autobiographies and memoirs. Over 2,000 years ago, Cicero, a Roman statesman, wrote something very important. I'd like to read it to you. History is the witness that testifies to the passing of time. It illuminates reality, vitalizes memory, provides guidance in daily life, and brings us tidings of iniquity. His writings still speak to us today and proclaim the importance of serving as witnesses of our time. But before we talk about your story, let's briefly look at various experiences some writers have had and why they have written their stories. Then later, we'll examine the writings of several Harford County writers and what stories they left us. The desire to share one's stories is likely as old as the first breath of adventure. Stories were traditionally passed down from generation to generation, but the ability to pass those stories more accurately to future generations is made possible through the written word. In 400 BC, the first known Western autobiography was by St. Augustine of Hippo. Now, listen very carefully as we cover these former biographies and autobiographies and memoirs, because they're going to show purpose. And that's one thing you're going to want to think of. Hippo reveals his journey from a life of youthful indulgences to a spiritual renewal. That was his purpose for writing. Do you want to enhance your image? Then you might want to read Julius Caesar, because he chronicled his military campaigns against several Gallic tribes to gain favor with the Roman government and how they looked at him. Since this time, numerous military leaders have followed suit. Have you triumphed over adversity? Then maybe you'll want to read Helen Keller's The Story of My Life. It covers her life up to the age of 21. She didn't become blind and deaf until she was 19 months old, but she did triumph over adversity with the help of her miracle worker, Annie Sullivan. Although Keller died in 1968, her successes still continue to inspire. We're still reading her words. Now, do you have a grudge against somebody? Then are you going to write a memoir for therapeutic reasons or revenge? Take a look at Christina Crawford. She penned a memoir called Mommy Dearest about her famous Hollywood mother, Joan Crawford. She wanted the last word about their relationship. Now, if I may, give a word of advice. If you want to write a memoir that is about revenge, write it. Share that emotion, that drama, that saga, that terror, that frustration. Then when you put the last period, go burn it. Because a revenge novel is never good for anybody. But let it lift your spirits by relieving your soul of the burden that you carry. Another topic often used is about natural disasters or community disasters. Natural disasters can ravish a country, but you might want to read Sonali Darren Argulas because she makes it personal. She speaks to you. She divulges the impact of a 2004 tsunami in Sri Lanka when it claimed her 2 sons, her parents, and her husband. Wave is the saga of physical and emotional survival. Maybe that's your purpose in writing. Do you have people that have been important in your life and you just want to share how they've impacted you? Well, take a look at Michelle Obama's Becoming. And by the way, what a great title for a memoir, because we're all in the stage of becoming and we never fully arrive. We're always evolving. So let's think about it. Hippo, Caesar, and Obama were or are public figures. Crawford's mother was famous. Darren Arugula experienced a disaster event and dared to share the depth of her experience and suffering and comeback. Those are the types of memoirs that we see in bookstores and that we know. But what about the stories of people who are not so well known or events that are not quite as catastrophic? For today, I have chosen 4 books to examine by former and current Harford County residents. I wanted to know on what level did they want to connect to their readers. I'll read a passage or 2 from each book. The purpose of the selections is not to reveal the detailed journey of the author, but instead to point out some of their methods of telling their stories and to pique your curiosity so you will read them for yourselves. As these books are discussed, think about how readers could identify with you and your life and how you will present your story. The first one I want to talk about is Under the Color of Law. It was written by Dwight Pettit, who lived in Aberdeen, Maryland. His father was George W. Pettit. Some of you may be familiar with these names. He wanted his son to have the best opportunities. Which parent doesn't? But in the 60s, schools identified as colored schools did not always offer the best path. So his father sued the Harford County Board of Education to grant his son admission to Aberdeen High School. The smiling pictures of high school days threw me back to my own school years, but his narrative told a much different experience. Pettit was a standout athlete. He wrote about athletics and race in his story. I want to read a couple of excerpts. Here is the first. One thing that provides and promotes the social integration process faster than anything I've ever seen in American life is athletics. If one is an athlete, if one can shoot the ball, throw the ball, run the ball, hit the ball, kick the ball, or knock someone out, it is almost neutralizing the fact of color. It can bring about instant change in someone's attitude and can create social acceptance overnight. In other words, athletics creates a transition in attitudes and speeds up the entire integration process. Wow, doesn't that sound promising? That's exciting that he's experiencing that in his life back in the 60s. But then you turn a couple of pages further, and this is what he has to say. Despite the legal struggle to achieve enrollment, it had never occurred to me and struck my psyche until then that you could be superior at something, yet you could be told you could not do something for no other reason in the world other than the fact that you were Black. But as a kid, 15 years old, that was the harsh reality, upfront and personal, of what my father had already told me. Coach Swartz called me into his office about a week before the first game. He said I could play any other position on the team, but I could not play quarterback. The interesting aspect about this was that they still did not have a quarterback, and they needed one right away because they had not prepared anybody for the upcoming game. In addition to his high school years, Pettit's book provides insights into his life, including his family history, a personal trilogy of court cases, his political involvement with Jimmy Carter, and his journey as a lawyer in Baltimore. The next book I want to talk to you about is Far from the Tree by Pat Higgins Edelhart. She is a longtime Harford County resident at Applewood Farm, and her book illuminates many of the dark shadows that came together to entangle her life in depression. Her writings reveal many things, including an insecure father and his sarcasm and mood swings, a family pattern of concealment, a college roommate's betrayal of trust, and the long-sought praise that never came. However, despite the darkness, Edelhart provides remembrances of joy and humor. She also artfully weaves in the time frame of her story, as evidenced by her experience with smoking. This is one technique that I would like to share with you right now. My parents and their friends smoked for as long as I could remember. Everybody in the movies, television, offices, restaurants, doctor's office, and hospitals smoked. If you didn't smoke, you were definitely not with it. For weeks, as soon as Mom and Dad went to bed, I unearthed the pack of cigarettes hidden at the back of my desk, doused the lights, and quietly opened the window. The fresh air was frigid, but I was in training. Taking a deep breath, I pulled the filtered end of the menthol Salem between my lips, struck a match, and dragged. Fits of coughing ensued as I fanned the smoke to keep it going out the east window. I smothered my face in my pillow to suppress the racking coughs. As they subsided, I listened intently, holding my cigarette out the window. My heart beat like a snare drum until I assured myself that the house remained quiet and Mom and Dad still slept, unaware of my subterfuge. What a delightful way to form a frame around what is happening while you're telling your story. A personal breakthrough to her psychological survival takes place in the chapter entitled Undaunted, but there will be no spoiler alerts for any of these books. You need to read the book and discover for yourself how she begins to reclaim her life and chart her future far from the tree. A day in the water can be relaxing and rejuvenating, but nature does not always smile. In Tragedy on the Susquehanna, 1968, Galen Ray Miles reveals the impact of losing friends at a young age. I had the opportunity to find her book at a bookstore on Main Street in Bel Air. It appealed to me right away because I live in Harford County. The prologue to the book is written like a novel. It shares the omnipotent point of view of a friend's struggle to find the shore and look for help for his two high school friends. I'd like to read it to you, parts of it. His fingers were numb from the cold and the tight hold on the empty gas can. It was his time to go. Death was real, but here he was. He sucked in another breath of cold, misty air as the storm waves crashed against his face like slapping hands, then slammed his body to the right, sometimes to the left. Pitch black, 34-mile-an-hour wind, air temperatures 38 degrees, water much colder. He was too weak to fight it. With his grip frozen on the gas can, he was forced to persevere, even though he had resigned himself to die into the environs he loved. How long he had been in the water, no telling. No moon, no stars, nothing to guide him to give a clue, just a fierce black storm. Had it been hours, days, or his 26 years that brought him to this very moment? It didn't matter, because this moment, he was convinced, was to be his last. Somewhere behind him, his two boyhood friends, were dying, or most likely already dead. Reading that excerpt still gives me chills. It helps me envision exactly what that young man must have been going through. In this book, you will be introduced to many individuals. Their part in the story is not always chronological, so you will find that her table of contents is very helpful in keeping track of the story's timeline because she gives dates in that. The events that take place in this book are throughout Harford County. Her descriptive narrative brings forgotten landmarks and stores and people back to life. I could just imagine myself at the places that she was describing. Perhaps you're thinking right now, I don't have enough drama or excitement in my life to write a book. Perhaps not, but you do have life experiences that are worthy of sharing. Ask yourself, what have you experienced that would be of interest to others? Are there memories that you want to leave behind for those you love? Have you worked through difficulties and want to light the way for others? While you start to ponder, I want to show you an example of a collaborative work. Brightview Avondale, senior living residents, share a period in time that is of such great importance and significance that it impacted the entire world. That event was World War II. The war extracted a cost from everybody, but not all paid the same price. It is this difference that makes this book of memories so exceptional and appealing. In this anthology, you will find the lingering effects of being on the front lines, the courage and stamina of holding up the home front, and how the greatest generation of all times dealt with adversity. These remembrances have been issued in 2 volumes and were prepared by the Avondale Veterans Committee. Bill Hassler, a friend, has collected these and edited them for these publications because he recognized through viewing other publications the importance of recording our memories. I have benefited from this greatly. And even my daughter, who is much younger, saw this and wanted to read it right away. In selecting a particular item to read, I knew a number of the residents, so it was hard to choose a selection. So instead, I opted to read an anonymous story that was left at the Aberdeen Room Archives Museum in 2014. It was provided for inclusion in the book by Charlotte Cronin, one of the founders of the museum. It underscores the need for humor in our darkest hours. I hope you enjoy it as I read. Dear unfortunate civilian friend, I am very enthusiastic about Army life. We lie in bed every morning until at least 6 o'clock. This gives us plenty of time to get washed and dressed and make some delete it blows. At 6:15, we stand outside and shiver. Reasonably chilled, we grope our way through the darkness to the mess hall. Here we have a healthy breakfast consisting of an unidentified liquid and a choice of white or rye crusts. We waddle back, gorged, to the barracks. Until 7:30, we just sit around and scrub toilets, mop floors, wash windows, and pick up all the matchsticks and cigarette butts within a radius of 2,000 feet of the barracks. At 8 o'clock, we put on our light packs and go for a tramp in the hills. The light pack includes gun, bayonet, canteen, meat can, cup, shaving kit, pup tent, raincoat, cartridge belt, first aid kit, fire extinguisher, tent pins and pole, rope, hand axe, small spade, and other negligible items. Carrying my light pack, I weigh 217 1/4 pounds. I weighed 131 pounds when I left home. So you can see how easy it is to gain weight in the Army. As one story ends, others wait to be told. So now we come to you. What do you want to pass on to people? Don't try to weasel out of this challenge. You're tuned in, so you're within it. If you don't know where to start, let me give you some ideas. I don't know about you, but I have a tendency to be inspired by things that I see or feel or do. And sometimes these words just energize me. So let me throw out some words to you. The crooked road to paradise. What does that make you think of? Have your experiences taken you on a spiritual journey or a road to material wealth or romance? If so, perhaps a title like this could inspire you. Try something a little different. Running from crazy. Did you grow up in a dysfunctional family? Have you needed to flee a difficult relationship? Have you considered going off the grid to escape the pressures of the internet? Maybe that will tweak your interest. How about something like these 3 words? Wolves, lambs, and honeybees. Do you have a story to share which has been influenced by the people you have had in your life and perhaps left your life? Maybe these 3 types of creatures capture their essence. At this point, some of you may be feeling a bit overwhelmed with the prospect of writing an entire book. So let's step back and think once again about the World War II memories book from the Avondale residents. How can you get started? Think about the societies that you are involved with, your associations, a church, a club, or another type of group? Would there be sufficient interest in a collaborative writing effort? Do you share personal trauma, grief, joy that could also serve as a theme for a book? Maybe you want to look at sharing experiences by the decades. Are the 60s important to you? Did they impact your life? What happened during the 60s? The Vietnam War, civil rights protests, the assassinations of US President John F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King? Or on a lighter side, the impact of the British invasion? Or maybe the 70s might be an opportunity to share pictures and anecdotes about bell-bottom jeans and the rise of disco, along with new technological changes. Or maybe the personal work could be more collaborative for an anthology. How your family came to live in Harford County. How you met your spouse, or how you left your spouse. Life lessons from raising children. Words of wisdom from your mother or father. Or perhaps our main event is what has taken place in your life as a result of COVID-19. Meet with your friends, take time to listen to others, and discover your connections. You may have the beginning of an anthology. Now, the first key to finishing is to start. So let's go back to those questions we began with and flesh them out a little bit. What life experiences do you want to pass on? Is there enough meat on the bone for a whole book? Or would it work better as part of a themed collection of work? What do you hope to achieve by telling your story? Do you want family members to better understand the people and events that shaped your life? Do you want to alert future generations to avoid certain pitfalls and not suffer consequences that you had to go to? Or do you have a story that will inspire others to love, to strive, to hope? Next, what potential impact will your version of the story have on others? Will your story inspire, entertain, enlighten, or help? Will the people in your book be flattered or angered? Would it be helpful to interview them before finishing your book? If the individual is no longer living, should you touch base with a family member of theirs? Would it be helpful to give them an advance copy before making it available to others? Now, very importantly, what are some potential resources? In the beginning, not of the world, but of this presentation, Jackie mentioned the Historical Society of Harford County. Did you listen to everything that is available just in downtown Bel Air? Whoa, what a storehouse of information to glean from. So start there. How about the people that have impacted your life? Pull out the old yearbooks, memory books, and personal journeys to inspire you. Look at the old newspapers that you have stored in boxes or that you find at the Historical Society. Also, a great inspiration for me is music. Listen to the songs that were popular for the years that you want to capture. Then you need to ask yourself, do I need to enlist the help of others to stay committed? I'd say 9 times out of 10, yes, you do. You may want to join a writer's group. I can tell you from personal experience that the writer's group that I am a part of has been a great inspiration and help on my journey to become a writer. Also consider attending a writer's seminar. Right now, probably most of them are online. So don't delay, don't wait for things to get back to normal. Get involved now. One thing that you can get involved with on the internet is take up the November National Novel Writing Month Challenge, otherwise known as NaNo. It'll help you write a novel in record-breaking time. That doesn't mean it's going to be ready for publication, but you'll get it done. Also consider enrolling in a writing class. Oh, did you remember that Jackie also mentioned that I teach a writing class? Maybe, at our local Harford Community College. Whether you write a book or a story for an anthology, consider why you want to write it. If it is purely therapeutic, that's fine. If you're the only audience that's ever going to read it, that's a good enough reason to write it. Or do you want to share it with audiences that may be limited to your family? And that's fine too. Now, keep in mind that we are flexible. Whatever you start off with as your purpose, whoever your audience is initially, it can change. Be flexible. You may decide that more people may be interested in your story and be willing to be able to benefit from it. So as you envision your work, think about how long your story is. Is it covering a short period of time or long? If it's long, you may want to consider developing a timeline. Plot out pertinent dates and months that are important to your story. And then insert words or phrases which capture relevant events. Now, please notice I said relevant events. Sometimes when we're writing, we get so excited about writing that we include a lot of stuff that's really not necessary and very boring, and it moves your story out of where it needs to be. So make it relevant. A chronological account will also be easier for your reader, especially readers who don't know you and your story. However, flashbacks can be brilliant when used effectively. Next, make sure you do your research. Be honest in your writing. As we talked about, our memories fade sometimes. If you do thorough research, it's going to help revive those memories, make them more crystal clear, make them come alive. And others may remember things differently than you do. So that's why it's helpful to talk to others. You also have to think about how much time, effort, and money you are willing and able to put into this project. If it is important to you, you will make it happen. Now, if your mind travels faster than your typing fingers, consider purchasing a recording device, a little handheld recorder, and tell your stories to the machine. That can help on a different level too. It's not like you have to remember everything as you're going because you're typing and thinking, whoa, what was I thinking? Oh, I forgot. But you're just telling a story, and it just flows so easily sometimes when you're talking into a machine and not having to worry about typos. I am hoping that our time together encourages you to start or continue your writing adventure. But remember, this is only your first step. It's up to you to take the next step. Don't leave your history behind. You lived it, you learned it. Now pass it on. Jackie, I'm going to turn it back over to you for the Q&As.
Thank you so much for that. I love listening to you. It gives me so many ideas. I do want to start with a few questions. We've gotten a couple already from folks. What do you think is the most important consideration when writing a memoir?
Honesty. I don't even have to think about that. You have to be honest on so many different levels. You have to be honest as far as why you want to write it. And then you have to be honest with the details. And that's why research is so important. You want to make sure that you research the heck out of this, because we tend to embellish sometimes without even realizing it. So you want to know why you're writing, who you're writing for, and you want to know what you hope to accomplish by this. And then also, I think for people who are writing memoirs, you have to be honest with your reader about what's going on inside. Not just the extraneous events that happen, but the turmoil that you're facing. Because writing a memoir is a very, very personal thing, unlike writing fiction or writing historical accounts about other people. You are exposing yourself to an audience that may take your heart differently. And you have to understand that they may not connect, or they may be angry with what you're sharing. But if you're going to write a good memoir, you have to be honest. You can't just tell somebody, oh, I was depressed. You have to tell them why. You have to let them know what happened in your heart, what happened in reality. And that's not always an easy thing to do. my hat is off to anybody who writes a memoir that deals with tragedy that they have gone through.
Is there a storyline or approach? You've got a lot of facts. Are there particular storylines or ways of organizing so that it flows well and it's not just a list of facts or a chronology, if you will?
Okay, there are different approaches to writing a memoir, which makes it very, very exciting. And then, of course, different reasons we do it. I think of Ulysses S. Grant. He never wanted to write his memoir, but after being a general and after being a president, through circumstances, he found himself destitute, sick, and he was going to leave his family without. So his friend Mark Twain told him, write. It's a little bit different than somebody else. He had so much to tell us historically about what he accomplished. So for him, he would be able to go through his own personal records as a general and follow through. Now, one of the things that we talked about was a chronological event. We are working with a very different audience now of readers than we had 20 and 30 years ago. Many of our readers are expectant of the boom impact to start off with. You know, let me know what happened and then fill in the details for me. I found this approach in Galen Miles' book, in her prologue. Oh my gosh, did it grasp you? She shared the main event of her story. Now somebody would say, oh, well, we already know, the basis of the story, why read it? Well, you've got to read the story because that's going to tell you the whys behind it, the relationships, the saga behind it. So you can do those flashbacks, you can do those omnipotent points of view. Now that I say that, you're going to look at what kind of point of view you want to write it from. So many memoirs are written from first person because you're telling your own story. And that's a good way of writing it. Some people will take more of the novel approach. And I think Ms. Miles' intention is to make her book into a novel in the future, which it certainly would be good. So her treatment of it as a novel would be different than what she presented in the book that we have now. So let me say that there is another way of doing this. Irma Bombeck. When I say that name, I would like to think that most of us know who she is. For me, she never came out with the ultimate memoir as people would envision, but her life lessons, I love. She would say things like, oh gosh, if I had my life to live over again, I wouldn't eat so many brown bananas. Well, there's so much truth in that. We have to enjoy life as we go along. So you can tell your story without writing a typical memoir. I have a friend, oh my goodness, and I won't mention her name, but every month or so, she comes out with this cute little thing that's called There's Never a Dull Moment, or Something's Always Happening. And she takes the mundane and makes it exciting. She's going to the store and she tells funny things that happen. That is a type of memoir in and of itself, but it's so entertaining and it's humorous. A memoir doesn't always have to be heart-wrenching, although those are the types that we generally gravitate to because we want to identify in our darkest moments and know that there's hope at the end of the tunnel. So I'll try to recap it just a little bit. You can do it chronologically, starting from when your theme begins or when your life begins, depending on the approach you're taking. You can also take it from a flashback, where you start with a flashback, which is the main, quote, theme or the emotion that you are bearing to your audience. Or you can also take it from a point of view that there are fun lessons to learn from life. Another point is, and I'll just say this very quickly, is write a book of fiction. You're saying, how can you do a memoir with a book of fiction? Well, for me, Mia Ripples in the Water, it's not really about me, but it's about those wolves, lambs, and honeybees that came into my life. And so I've got it packed full of information of the people who taught me lessons in life. And so that's kind of my memoir that's disguised as a mouse. But how you write it is going to depend a lot on your personality and the type of audience that you are reaching for. If it's family, then you could probably take that smoother, slower, more methodical, descriptive pace. But if you're looking for a wider audience, you may want to think about uploading some drama at the beginning.
What's the key to making dialogue believable?
It has to flow naturally. It has to flow naturally. And in writing, sometimes you will find that people have pages and pages of nothing but dialogue. And it can work. But I think to make dialogue very natural, you have to be an eavesdropper. You know, when we're talking, we're not necessarily listening to what we're saying. But one thing I love to do is to go into crowded places and just listen how people talk. For the most part, we talk with contractions. We don't say, I do not. You say, I don't. And also pepper into the dialogue a little visual of what that person is doing at the time. Like Debbie was talking for this memoir, and you might want to quote me and say, oh, and her hands were flipping all over the place and her head was tilting back and forth. Give the reader a little something to visualize, to put a little frame around the words that are being said. A lot of people also like to write in dialect. Dialect can be effective, but you must be very, very careful, because if you make the dialect too precise, your reader may not understand the dialect, and they spend too much time trying to understand the nuances in what's being said. So sometimes you're safer just to say, Debbie spoke with a Southern drawl, and then just let it say, Noon's air was fat with humidity. Instead of saying, Noon's air was fat with humidity. You don't want to do that necessarily in the written word. If you're going to read your book to somebody, then you can. But my main advice in that area is just be a little intruder of other people's conversations and just see how it flows between them. Now, I will tell you that when you're writing a book, we never quite write the way that we talk. Because when we talk, we use a lot of ums and does, and you don't want to fill the writer or the reader up with dialogue that's not pertinent to your story. You want to make sure that dialogue is pertinent to your story, that it adds relevance, that it helps move the character, it helps move the story, because that's why they're there, to find out what your story is.
With storytelling, how do you judge the interest and the actual engagement of your audience?
With storytelling, it's so much easier when you are in person and live. You really don't know how you're reaching an audience when you are putting your book out there, unless you have readers that respond and say, oh, I like this, this worked for me, or I didn't like this. You know, you have to kind of gauge it. And that's one reason that you may want to have a select group of people read your work before you have it published. Once again, I'll make another plug for writers groups. Writers groups have a common theme. They want to improve their writings. They want to put it out there for others. And you have to have a hard skin if you're a writer. You have to understand that not everybody does love what you write. And you also have to understand that you are the master of your words. So you can get the feedback, you can hear what people have to say, but at the end, you decide where the period goes, you decide what that sentence says. And because that's your name that's going to be on that book. So having a testing group give you feedback is so important. Now, if I may say, do not ask your mother, do not ask your father, or somebody who is too close to you to read your book for content, because no matter what you write, they're going to love it. They're going to say, oh, this is great, but that's because they love you. get together with some people that may not have that vested interest in you, but who you can trust and who are honest with their feedback. Not critically hurtful, but just honest with their feedback.
I had a couple of questions about the mechanics. You talked about using recording devices.
Yes.
Do you think it's okay to use something like the dictate feature on Microsoft Word or Dragon or one of those other packages that sort of takes dictation, especially when you're dealing, if you're somebody who's not really good at just the physical act of writing, putting stuff onto paper?
Absolutely, Jackie. In this world of technology, we should take advantage of every tool that is available to us. Now, Dragon will work for some people, but it doesn't work for other people. And you have to remember, if you've ever sent a voice email message before, you need to proofread, because it will not always cover the message the way that you think you're giving a message. But by all means, use what works for you. There are many people who don't know how to type. So writing a book, whether it be a memoir or a children's illustrated book, whatever, it's just so daunting because they don't type. And these are tools that we can use. Another tool that I would recommend, and I have no stock in it, is Grammarly. Grammarly will help you. Now, once again, you cannot take their recommendations 100%. You have to read it for yourself and see what really makes sense. And I'm going to make a plug for another online service, and that is RhymeZone. No stock in that, but I use it faithfully. I think the name of it is a little misleading, and some of you may say, I'm not writing poetry, I don't want to look at RhymeZone. Oh, it's much more than that. It gives you synonyms, antonyms, definitions. You can type in phrases, and it will tell you what book it's from, who wrote the book. These, of course, are the most famous books, but it is so helpful when you're writing. So yes, use all those tools that are out there.
We've had a question. Can you, again, give us the names of the books and the authors of the books, the 4 books that you talked about today?
Oh, I would be more than happy to.
Didn't get that.
Of course, of course. I will start off, I'll take them backwards. This is called Memories, and it's written by the Avondale residents, remember, World War II, and there's 2 parts to it. If you are interested, though I hope you don't mind, please contact Avondale, ask for Bill Hassler, and he will make sure that you get it. I believe this runs $10, but it's well worth it, every penny. And one thing that readers are going to love is that there's photographs in here, and they're photographs of people, photographs of ration cards. It just makes history come alive for you. And the folks at Avondale just have tons of amazing stories to share. So that's one of them. This one is Tragedy on the Susquehanna, and it's 1968. It's Galen, Gailen, Ray, R-A-E, Miles, M-I-L-E-S. Now, I got this from a bookstore in Bel Air. I'm going to guess that you can get it through Barnes & Noble, but if anybody should have difficulty finding any of these, contact me, and I will make sure that I set you up with who you can get it from. This book, Far from the Tree, by Pat Higgins Edelhart, is also available on Amazon, and it's quite a fun read, and it's also enlightening and encouraging. Under the Color of Law, and this one is by Dwight Pettit, is also available on Amazon. Can you see it without a glare? Here we go. All right.
I would like to encourage the authors of those books, if they haven't already done so, to consider donating a copy to the Historical Society. We have a library, and obviously we specialize in books by and about the people who live in Harford County. And each of those, I think, would qualify.
I think so.
Can you help us, if I want to find a writers group, what's a good writers group to join? How do I find it? If I don't, how can I start one of my own?
Okay, well, I will share that information. I'm a member of the Harford Writers Group, and it is a very good group. Right now we're meeting via Zoom, and it is led by Karen Harrison. And all you have to do is go on the web, and you can find information about it. We also have our own website that is handled by Katie Sang. It is a group of dedicated people. That is one option. Now, I'm going to tell you another option by giving you some historical information on this group. This group was started by a group of students who attended a writing class at Harford Community College. And they had enough interest and enough drive to form their group, which has lasted years now. And that is one of the best things that I would recommend, is to join a current writers group or to go to a class or a seminar and make connections. Because there you can kind of see the people who have like passions that you do, and you can form your group and just keep in touch. We meet once a month. People submit their pieces for evaluation and critiques, but those are the two of the best ways to do it. Either look online for existing groups or form your own group from attendances at seminars or classes, things like that.
Okay, I will encourage folks who are watching to go ahead and add your questions either in the chat or using the Q&A feature. Also at the bottom of your Zoom screen if you hover over that. In the meantime, I do want to talk a little bit about a program that the Historical Society is starting. And maybe you can help us, Debbie, think about how folks might get started in doing this. The Historical Societies plan to compile an anthology of local memoirs for publication as part of the Harford 250th anniversary celebration, which is in 2023. For those of you who don't know, that will be the 250th anniversary of the founding of Harford County. We will be accepting submissions from current and former county residents. We'd like for them to be double-spaced. We're looking for short ones, no more than 2,000 words, and certainly we'll accept submissions that are shorter. You'll be able to submit those through the Historical Society. I'll give you a bit of information, more information at the end on how to do that. And then a committee made up of 3 members of the Harford 250th Anniversary Committee will choose which submissions get included in this final memoir document. So that's what the Historical Society is hoping to do. And I think the current pandemic, for folks who aren't sure what else to write, writing about your own experience and your own memories during 2020, I think will be something that's very valuable and will be useful to folks 50 or 75 or 100 years from now. Debbie, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
I would like to add something. One of the members of the Historical Society, Carol Dybel, and I have been talking because we are so excited about your project. And you know Carol, she is...
It's Carol's project.
Okay, good, well, Carol's project. And we have made arrangements with Harford Community College to offer a memoir mini, probably in the fall. Now, the thing that you have to understand, I'm going to tell you straight up, you do not, by any stretch of the imagination, need to be in this class to be considered for this wonderful anthology. It's just for people who may want to say, yeah, I'd like to do it, but I don't know how to get started and I don't have anybody to help me. Well, we're looking at this fall doing 3 classes, 1 hour each, to just help you along the way. Each class is going to be focused on a different subject. For instance, people, places, and events. Those are generally the 3 things that you would be writing about for this memoir. So if you think you need a little kickstart, just feel free to join us in the fall, but that's, down the road. And like I said, you don't get any advantage to be selected by attending the class. It's just something you might want to consider.
And when you say the fall,
yes.
You mean the fall of 2021?
Yes, the fall of 2021. Yes, yes. And that may seem far away to people, but what they should start doing is, we're planting seeds today. So you start writing your little stories and get them ready. And then that way, your time in this memoir class, if you decide to join it, hopefully will be more important because we will be able to work with something you already have.
Carol, I see that you've been added as a panelist. Is there anything you wanted to add?
I think one of the things that I found is most people don't realize that their stories are part of history, and they need to be able to share those for people in the future. And so what I see this project doing is telling us the story of Harford County. And every one of us has had so many different experiences in life in Harford County, with the people, with the places, and the events. And so your story is really important. And I really encourage people to do this, to tell your friends about it. I think it's going to be a wonderful project.
So the time frame for this, we'll begin accepting submissions in January of 2021, and it would go through the end of 2021 is our current thought process in terms of the mechanics of it. So anytime in 2021. Chris Potts, you've also joined us. Is there anything you wanted to add? For those who aren't familiar with her, Chris does a lot, is a writer herself and does a lot of editing of publications for the Historical Society. Chris, you're mute.
I would just say that I think this sounds like an incredibly exciting project, and agree with Carol that the more people we have contributing to a recording of history, the more exciting it will be for future generations.
And if you're not ready to start writing your memoir, consider at least keeping a diary, particularly through this year. But I will tell you that in an earlier talk, we had which was on the Civil War in Harford County, we had the benefit of a diary written by a Mrs. Gibson during the Civil War. Mrs. Gibson, who was just writing her diary, had no idea that 150 years later, it would provide a really important thread for understanding individual people's experience of the Civil War in our jurisdiction, and would end up being sort of the bedrock of a presentation that we gave, that was given by one of our Civil War historians. So consider writing these things down, consider contributing things to our permanent collection, because truly they may be useful far beyond your imaginings or mine. I think we're getting pretty close to wrapping up. We did have one more question for you, Debbie. Somebody asked, my siblings often have memories of a particular event that differ greatly from how I recall it. I think they're not the only person who has that experience.
Yes.
How do I tell my story without antagonizing my siblings?
Well, that may not be an option. Now, what they may want to do is they may want to tell their version of events, but also include their siblings' version of the events in their memoir. And that way, everybody's recollection is covered. Because it is so true. It is like people witnessing an accident. People see different things, they feel different things, they hear different things, depending on where they are. Are there any obstructions in their vision to witnessing what has happened? Just because they all remember things differently doesn't mean that anybody's wrong. It just means that they're different. And so my recommendation would be to, when possible, give them a voice in your memoir. And that leads me to something that somebody asked me the other day is, do people embellish their memoirs? And the answer to that is yes, yes, and yes. And there's different levels of embellishment. Some are out of necessity. We don't remember everything. So in order to paint a picture of a story, sometimes we have to, through our research, determine what may have happened. Another thing that a lot of people do in their memoirs is include dialogue. Well, unless you have a photographic memory, you don't remember the dialogue. So sometimes we have to embellish with the dialogue, and you just base that dialogue on your research and your recollections of these people that is in fact to the best recollection based on what's available to you. Now on the far scale, you have people that will embellish because they want to sell books. And that's their main goal. And so they make villains more villainous. They make good people better than they were. And they sprinkle in some salt and pepper just to spice it up. So yeah, there is embellishment that goes on. Now, Jackie, if we don't have any more questions, may I have one more moment?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. It was mentioned to me the other day that sometimes you know somebody that would be a good author of their own story, but may not be a willing author of their own story. I hope what happens today, and most of the people in our audience are interested, but I hope that we're all thinking about people that we have talked with, maybe grandparents, parents, aunts or uncles, friends. They tell tremendous stories. They have so much to tell. But if you ask them, write something, they'll say, no, I don't want to know. So I've come up with a few things that you may want to do. First of all, invite them out for coffee. Or if you really want to soften them up, invite them out for lunch or dinner. Start talking about the stories that you remember that make you believe this person has something to share with other people. Talk about old movies, old songs, and look through yearbooks and photo albums together if you can. Now, once you've got them kneaded and softened up a little bit, let them know how much their stories mean to you, what difference it makes in your life, and how you feel like it could impact other people just as well. And then offer them a lifeline. Tell them that if they're willing, you will help them. And if they agree, set up another meeting. And then meet where they are comfortable. Maybe in their house, in their favorite chair, or maybe at a favorite park, a favorite restaurant. And take with you prepared questions to help guide the discussion. And then also ask them if you can record it. Because if they're not watching you write and they're just flowing with it, the stories may come more readily. And allow those recollections to flow. And then once you finish, you go home, you go over everything that was said or recorded, and then you come up with more questions because you want them to fill in the blanks for you later on. And then just guide them through it, help them through it, and just remind them that they have a story to tell that will be of interest to other people. So I hope that helps that person that was curious about that.
Okay. Bill, if you'll put up the last slide. We certainly hope that you have enjoyed this afternoon's presentation as much as I have, in fact. And we hope you're looking forward to looking back over your own life. And we do want to let you know that you can purchase several of Ms. Jennings' books through the bookstore on the Society's website. They will make great Christmas and birthday gifts. We've talked a bit about our plan to compile an anthology of local memoirs for publication. Submissions should be sent to the Historical Society of Harford County in care of Carol Dybel, 143 North Main Street, Bel Air, 21014, or you can email them directly to Carol, C-A-R-O-L, Dybel, D-E-I-B-E-L, at verizon.net. Submissions will be accepted from current and former county residents. They should be double-spaced with no more than 2,000 words. Shorter works will certainly be accepted. We encourage you to include photographs. The stories should be specifically related to an event, person, or place in Harford County. All submissions will be retained in our archives permanently. A committee made up of 3 members of the Harford 250 Anniversary Committee will choose which submissions to include in the final document. And as I said earlier, the deadline for submission is December 31st, 2021. We encourage you to visit our website to learn more about the history of Harford County and to consider joining the Historical Society of Harford County. A gift membership may be the perfect present for someone this holiday season. Our web address is www.harfordcounty.org. harfordhistory.org. Thank you, and please join us for future events. You can find a list of our events on the website. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.